A billionaire financier. A private island in the Caribbean. Decades of abuse. Hundreds of victims. He flew the world's most powerful people on his private jet. They called it the Lolita Express. For years, he operated in plain sight. Protected by wealth. Protected by power. Protected by connections. Until the victims spoke out. Until the FBI arrested him. Until the world learned the truth. His name was Jeffrey Epstein. He died in jail in 2019. Ruled a suicide. But questions remain. His partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, was convicted in 2021, sentenced to 20 years. And in 2024, the files were unsealed. Thousands of pages, court documents, depositions, flight logs, revealing the scope of the operation, the victims' testimonies, and how justice was delayed for decades. This is the story of the Epstein Files, and what they finally revealed. Welcome back to the hidden world. What I'm about to tell you is one of the darkest stories of power, abuse, and corruption in modern history. Jeffrey Epstein. If you heard that name before 2019, you probably knew him as a wealthy financier, a mysterious billionaire with connections to everyone. Presidents, princes, scientists, celebrities. He threw parties at his Manhattan mansion. He owned a private island in the Caribbean. He flew on a private Boeing 727. He seemed untouchable, but here's what most people didn't know. Behind the wealth and power was a predator, running an international sex trafficking operation for decades. And he didn't do it alone. His partner was Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of disgraced media mogul Robert Maxwell, British socialite, well-connected, sophisticated. Together, they built a machine, a system designed to recruit, groom, and abuse vulnerable young girls, some as young as 14 years old. And they got away with it for years. Why? Because Epstein had something powerful people wanted: access, money, connections, and according to court documents, potentially compromising information. He cultivated relationships with the elite. He positioned himself as a philanthropist. He donated to science and education. He acted like a legitimate businessman, but it was all a facade. The truth was hidden in plain sight. On his private island, in his Manhattan mansion, in his Palm Beach estate, in his Paris apartment, behind closed doors, the abuse was systematic, organized, ongoing, and it took decades for justice to catch up. This is that story. Jeffrey Epstein's operation was sophisticated, calculated, and protected by layers of wealth and influence. Here's how it worked. According to court documents and victim testimony, Ghislaine Maxwell was the recruiter. She would approach young girls, often from troubled backgrounds, vulnerable, looking for opportunities. She would befriend them, offer them jobs, as masseuses, as assistants, promising money and opportunities. She presented herself as sophisticated, trustworthy, a mentor. The girls were brought to Epstein's properties: Manhattan, Palm Beach, his private island, Little St. James, located in the U.S. Virgin Islands. At first, it seemed legitimate: massage jobs, good pay, professional environment. But then, the abuse would begin. And once it started, Epstein had control. He paid them, created a sense of obligation, sometimes threatened them, sometimes manipulated them. According to court documents, Maxwell participated directly in the abuse. She normalized it. She pressured victims. She was not just an accomplice. She was an active participant. The system was self-perpetuating. Victims were encouraged to recruit other girls, paid for bringing in friends, creating a pyramid of abuse. This went on for years. Through the 1990s, through the 2000s, hundreds of victims, according to prosecutors, potentially thousands. And Epstein's wealth allowed him to operate with impunity. He had powerful lawyers. He had connections to law enforcement. He had friends in high places. When questions were asked, they were shut down. When investigations started, they were quietly closed, until they couldn't be anymore. The first major break came in 2005. A victim came forward in Palm Beach, Florida. She reported Epstein to local police, said he had abused her when she was 14. Police began investigating. They found more victims, dozens of them, with consistent stories. The evidence was overwhelming. The FBI got involved. A federal investigation began. Prosecutors prepared charges. Jeffrey Epstein was facing life in prison, and then something shocking happened. In 2008, Epstein's legal team, led by high-powered attorney Alan Dershowitz, negotiated a deal, a plea agreement, with the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, Alexander Acosta. The deal was unprecedented. Epstein pled guilty to 2 state prostitution charges. Not federal sex trafficking, not abuse of minors, prostitution. His sentence? 13 months, in a county jail. With work release privileges, that means he spent 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, in his office, only returning to jail to sleep. It's called the sweetheart deal, one of the most lenient sentences in modern legal history. But here's the most disturbing part. The deal included immunity, not just for Epstein, but for any potential co-conspirators. That language protected everyone in his network, including Ghislaine Maxwell. And the victims? They weren't even told about the deal until after it was signed. This violated federal law, the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Victims must be informed of plea agreements, but Acosta and Epstein's lawyers kept it secret. Why? According to later reports, Acosta told colleagues that Epstein belonged to intelligence, that he was told to back off. Acosta has denied this, but questions remain. Epstein served his 13 months, registered as a sex offender, and returned to his life of luxury. The victims were betrayed. Justice was denied. But they didn't give up. For years after the sweetheart deal, Epstein continued his life. He still had his properties, his wealth, his connections, but the victims didn't stay silent. One victim in particular refused to go away. Virginia Giuffre. She came forward publicly, told her story, filed lawsuits. According to her testimony, she was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell when she was 16 years old. Working at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Maxwell approached her, offered her a job as a traveling masseuse. For Jeffrey Epstein, Virginia says she was trafficked internationally, forced to have relations with powerful men in Epstein's network. She named names, provided details, testified in depositions. Other victims came forward too, each with their own story, each describing the same system, the same methods, the same perpetrators. They filed civil lawsuits. They pushed for the sweetheart deal to be overturned. They demanded justice. Investigative journalists started digging. The Miami Herald published a groundbreaking series in 2018, Perversion of Justice, by reporter Julie K. Brown. The series revealed the full scope of the sweetheart deal, the number of victims, the extent of Acosta's involvement. Public outrage exploded. Pressure mounted on federal prosecutors, on the Department of Justice, on the FBI. Something had to be done. And in July 2019, it finally was. July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein landed at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. Returning from Paris on his private jet, FBI agents were waiting. He was arrested, charged with federal sex trafficking, conspiracy to commit sex trafficking. This time, there would be no sweetheart deal. Prosecutors in the Southern District of New York were not backing down. They had new evidence, new victims willing to testify, and a determination to see justice done. Epstein was held without bail at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. His lawyers fought for release, offered to post bail, offered house arrest, offered electronic monitoring. The judge denied it all. Too dangerous, too much flight risk, too many resources. Epstein was going to trial, and he was facing decades in prison, but he would never see that trial. August 10, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell, hanging from a bedsheet. The death was ruled a suicide, but immediately, questions arose. Epstein was supposed to be on suicide watch. He had been removed from it. The guards assigned to check on him every 30 minutes had fallen asleep. The cameras outside his cell malfunctioned. His cellmate had been transferred out days before. The autopsy showed injuries consistent with hanging. But a private autopsy commissioned by Epstein's brother suggested the injuries could indicate strangulation. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it negligence? We may never know the full truth, but what we do know is this. Epstein's death meant he would never face trial, never testify, never name anyone else in his network, and that left many questions unanswered. But the case wasn't over, because Ghislaine Maxwell was still out there. After Epstein's death, Ghislaine Maxwell went into hiding. For months, no one knew where she was. Federal prosecutors were building a case against her, as Epstein's co-conspirator, as an active participant, as the person who made the operation possible. On July 2, 2020, the FBI found her. She was arrested at a luxury property in New Hampshire. She had been living under an assumed name, in a $1 million estate. With security measures in place, she was charged with 6 counts, including sex trafficking of minors, conspiracy, and perjury. Her trial began in November 2021. The prosecution presented victim after victim. Women who had been girls when they met Ghislaine, who testified about how she recruited them, how she normalized the abuse, how she participated in it. One victim testified that Maxwell touched her inappropriately, multiple times, sometimes while Epstein was present. Another described how Maxwell made her feel special, then betrayed that trust. The defense argued Maxwell was being scapegoated, that she was a victim of Epstein's manipulation, that the memories of witnesses were unreliable. The jury didn't buy it. December 29, 2021. Guilty, on 5 of 6 counts, including sex trafficking of a minor. June 28, 2022. Sentencing, 20 years in federal prison. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently serving her sentence at a low-security prison in Florida. She maintains her innocence. Her lawyers have filed appeals, but for the victims, it was a measure of justice. Not complete, not enough, but something. Even with Maxwell convicted, questions remained. Who else was involved? Who knew what was happening? Who participated? For years, court documents in related civil cases were sealed, protected by privacy orders, hidden from the public. But in December 2023, a federal judge ordered documents to be unsealed. And on January 2, 2024, the first batch was released. Hundreds of pages, court filings, depositions, emails, flight logs. The media called them the Epstein Files. What did they reveal? Names. Lots of names. People who had flown on Epstein's plane. People who had visited his properties. People mentioned in victim testimony. The documents didn't prove criminal activity by most of these people, but they showed the scope of Epstein's connections. Politicians, business leaders, scientists, celebrities. Some had already been publicly linked to Epstein. Others were newly named in the documents. The documents also revealed more details about how the operation worked, the recruitment methods, the payments, the travel, and they showed how long people around Epstein knew, or should have known. One particularly disturbing revelation was about Epstein's staff. According to documents, household employees at his properties witnessed abuse. Some testified they saw young girls coming and going constantly. Some said they were told not to talk about it. Some were paid for their silence. The files also revealed the extent of Epstein's legal strategy, how his lawyers worked to silence victims, how they used NDAs and settlements to keep stories quiet, how they fought to keep evidence sealed. For the victims, seeing these documents go public was bittersweet. Their stories were validated. Their courage was vindicated. But the trauma was relived, and many powerful people named in the documents faced no consequences. Because being mentioned in the files doesn't mean criminal charges. It means you were part of Epstein's world. But what that involvement entailed varies dramatically. The question everyone asks is, why did it take so long? Why was Epstein allowed to operate for decades? Why did the sweetheart deal happen? Why weren't more people held accountable? The answer is complicated. Money, power, connections. Epstein had all three. He hired the best lawyers. He made powerful friends. He cultivated relationships with people who could protect him. And according to court documents and victim testimony, he had information, potentially compromising information, about powerful people. Some have speculated he used this as leverage, as protection, as insurance. We may never know the full extent. What we do know is that wealth and power created a shield that protected him from justice for far too long. But eventually, the shield cracked. Because of brave victims who refused to stay silent, because of journalists who kept investigating, because of prosecutors who kept pushing, justice was delayed. But it wasn't completely denied. Epstein is gone. Maxwell is in prison. The files are public. The victims have been heard. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's something. The Epstein case teaches us something crucial about power. Wealth can buy protection. Connections can buy silence. Influence can delay justice, but it cannot erase the truth forever. The victims in this case showed extraordinary courage. They faced their abusers in court. They told their stories publicly. They refused to let power silence them. Virginia Giuffre, and dozens of others whose names we may never know, who testified, who fought for justice, who made sure the world knew. They are the heroes of this story. Not the billionaire, not the socialite, not the powerful people who looked the away. The survivors. If you or someone you know is experiencing trafficking or abuse, please reach out. National Human Trafficking Hotline. 1-888-3737-888. RAIN Sexual Assault Hotline. 1-8006-564673. Help is available. You are not alone. This has been The Hidden World. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss a case. Turn on notifications. Comment below. What case should I cover next? Share this video to spread awareness. Because as this case proves, evil can hide behind wealth, behind power, behind connections. But eventually, the truth comes out, and justice, delayed as it may be, can still be served. Rest in peace to all the victims who never got to see this day. Strength to all the survivors still healing. Stay safe out there. Trust your instincts. Speak up when you see wrong, because silence protects predators, and courage brings them down. Until next time.